So we got the magazine Mustang, and do you see anything wrong here? That is going to change in today's video. So with this car, I got this car for ridiculously cheap, but that does not mean that we are going to slack on the quality of the build. From start to finish, I kind of have a concept that we want to make the vehicle as nice as possible with as small of a budget as possible. Let's see what we can do with that, and let's get started. Super excited to get going on this one.
And now, you're watching the Mustang channel of YouTube. Welcome to Body Vision.
What is up and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me yet again on another video. So if you're not familiar with this car, with what it is, this was featured in Super Ford February of 1991. Long story short, I ended up with the car. We got no engine, we got no nothing. It's pretty much just a rolling show. I got it for about $1,000 give or take, considering that I had to rent a trailer, gas and fuel to go get it. I got it out of Jupiter, Florida, and now we are in Central Florida, just outside of Orlando. So here it is. The goal is, and what I'm thinking for this build is I want to bring it back to its former glory. I would have loved to put a Coyote in it, but I just feel like that's a whole bunch of money that's not really necessary for what makes the car cool. Of course, a Coyote will make anything cooler, but it's just not really necessary. I don't feel like it makes sense to spend the amount of money for how much cooler it's going to become, because the thing is already cool for what it is. So let me show you what I got and what I'm thinking for this thing. I guarantee you would have never guessed it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You're gonna have to be the judge on that one. So here it is, right here in all of its glory, something that you would have never guessed, but if you think about it, it really does make sense. This is a 1988 Lincoln Town Car. We have a 1988 Foxbody Mustang, pretty much the same motor. Now, the head's not exactly the same, the intake's not exactly the same, the cam's not exactly the same, but it is still a 302 pushrod V8, which that motor over there, or what would have came in the vehicle over there, would have been a very similar motor. Now, did I get a weaker, slower motor? Kind of. Well, not kind of, I definitely did. But this entire car, as you see it, was $600. So now we are still less than $2,000 for the car as it sits. Even after I throw a couple $100 into this thing to make it work, it's gonna be great. We are going to be extremely low on that budget and make something really cool. Another thing is, when you buy an entire car, it comes with so much stuff. What the heck is going on over there? So one thing about buying an entire car is there's so many things that you save money on. For example, the radiator that's in here, that'll probably work in the Mustang. I don't have that. So it's not just the motor when you're doing a swap. All of these things add up. So part of the challenge that I'm setting for myself for this vehicle, and I want to be transparent with you throughout the entire process, because I feel like that's a little bit more relatable. How inexpensive can we make something like that happen? I want that to be a point that I can brag on. Like, you think this Mustang's cool, it looks super nice, look at the paint job, it's running, it's driving, it's doing everything that it's supposed to do. Well, let me tell you something else. We made it happen for less than X amount of dollars when I figure out how much those dollars are going to be in the end based on what we put into it. So what I'm thinking is, for this, I'm going to be parting out this car because that's going to whittle away at our list, getting that number down as low as possible. So I want to start to rip off some of the pieces. The front end is in good condition, the doors are in good condition, the door panels, the trim. Somebody before me was actually parting it out before I got to it. The only thing that's missing is the sunroof, because the sunroof on these town cars are gigantic. They put them on Impalas or whatever, anything. They could put them on anything. I think is the biggest factory sunroof. So that's something that's really popular to be ripped off of these vehicles. Now everything else, $600, I'll take it. $500 once we get the wheel sold. So enough talking, enough thinking about it. Let's just go ahead, figure out what we need to do to start tearing off parts to eventually extract the motor out of this thing.
Right. Oh, did I told you that my neighbor talked
the front end off, and usually when you pull a motor, you don't need to mess around with the front end or do any of that stuff. But with this car being fully parted out, I'm not concerned with any of the pieces. So I thought, why don't I just make it easier on myself, get the front end out of here. That way I can start figuring out what I want to keep, what I want to delete, what I'm going to need to keep track of. Anything that I'm going to possibly use, like the radiator and stuff I threw in the trunk, all the junk is just going to go in the car, because at some point when I'm done with this whole thing is going to get out of here. Anything that I don't want or need or can sell is going to be gone. So now that we have all of the access in the world that we need, I think I'm going to start to strip down the motor a little bit, or maybe think about what all has to be disconnected. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I do know that I'm going to keep making progress on this thing until eventually we get this motor out of here. Then once we get the motor on a stand, we can start figuring out how much we want to upgrade this thing. So let's keep it moving. Alright, so really quickly I wanted to discuss with you a concept, and if you're upset that I'm going with this cheap motor in that car, that you were hoping we'd have a Coyote motor in it, and I'm just being an overall cheap ass, let me tell you where my mind's at. So with this, with what I'm doing, with putting this motor in the widebody Foxbody Mustang, this is not making it become any lesser of a car. If you come across 10, 15 grand and you want to put a Coyote in it, or if I wanted to do that in the future, near or far, I could rip this one out, no problem, build that motor and put it in, no problem whatsoever. Where I have a problem with being a cheap ass when it comes to building cars is if you don't want to paint the entire thing, so you just say, you know, it'd be kind of cool, let me bedline it. Now if you actually want to do a proper paint job, you're going to have to deal with the mess that is the bedliner all over the car, getting that sanded down, which is such a terrible process. So you're actually making the car worse by being a cheap ass. This, if I put this cheap motor in the car, it really makes no difference in the grand scheme of things. The only thing it's going to do is make it better than it is right now, because as of right now it's sitting doing nothing. If I put this cheap motor in it to make it run and drive and sound cool and take it to some shows, that's pretty cool. If the videos do really well, if the response is really well, who knows, in the future if I wanted to get more serious with it, put a Coyote in it, see what it does in the quarter, or put an LS in it and make the Ford purists really upset, I could do that. So with this car, I got all the mounts loose, this cross member loose. I was gonna pull this from the trans and just pull out the motor, but I think I'm gonna pull everything. I don't have anything in the way, so let's just get it hooked up and get it ripped out. And then I can separate the motor from the transmission, tear it down, do whatever else I need to do, and then really get a good look at this thing. Who knows, I might pull off the heads and say, this thing is disgusting, and not even use it and then just sell it off for parts. And I'm pretty confident that I can get my money back in parts if I really wanted to. And that's why I thought it was a decent deal and worth the risk. So let's go ahead and get, that's funny looking. Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Let's get this thing ripped out and dive into it a little bit more. So right here we are looking at our beautiful 302 motor. Now I'm going to be working underneath it. We need to pull off the starter. We need to pull off the flex plate bolt so that way we can separate the transmission. Now that I'm going to be underneath it, one little key that I wanted to show you. I got a bolt right here, so I'm just going to run that up to the top just so that way there's no possibility that the chains can let go having the motor come down. I don't think anything would break, but it's better to be safe than sorry, so just shove something in there, that way it is all good. But I have a problem right now. We have a stuck bolt, so I need to weld something on it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just gonna weld this guy on it right here. I have an extractor socket that didn't work, so it's just all toast, and this needs to come off for our cover. And I don't want to just grind it off because then it's still going to be stuck in the bell housing. I'm not going to be keeping this transmission, but I don't want to screw over the next guy because I could have took a little bit more time to get it sorted out properly. And also any chance that I have to fire up my HTP 220 welder is a good time. So let's get this welded on. No reason to talk more about it. Ah! So let's cook this baby on nice and hot. That's what the doctor ordered. All right, so let's give that a second to cool off. Then I'm gonna put a socket on it and see what it does. Okay, come on. So we got the motor on the stand. Now I would never talk bad about a company or their stand or their product, but you can read the label on the stand. Dude, this stand, I hate the way that it's leaning. I feel like the motor's just gonna, like if I lifted it up right here, just by like a little bit, the whole thing would go down. But you can see here that the frame of the stand is like super leaned out. So I don't know if I should weld the support in between or if by the time I pull off the intake manifold and the headers and everything will lighten up. Maybe it's okay, just an observation. This thing is leaned out. So let's just keep this here for now, just in case. So let's just get it all torn down, see what we got, and see if this thing's worth putting in the Mustang. All right, so really quickly, what I decided, I can't even turn this thing. It's so front heavy that I'm not even going to mess around with it. I'm not gonna risk it falling and somebody getting hurt. I mean, the motor, losing the motor is one thing, but somebody getting hurt is way more troublesome for me. So this thing, I gotta get it off. Look, dude, the whole stand is doing a forward-facing wheelie here, so I gotta be careful with this. I'm just going to get it off. I'm gonna cut off the stand. I mean, I could probably return it, blah, 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 but then if I just return it, I'm gonna get another one. I got a grinder, I got a welder. I'll just make it right, maybe reinforce it with a gusset or something. All I care about is getting a chain on this thing, getting it off here, and getting this stand fixed. So just really quickly, cutting some stuff off, running a speed square over here, making sure this is a nice and tight 90. You know, you could overcomplicate it and think at what degrees is what off. I don't care about any of that stuff. All I care about is the fact that I want this to sit 90 degrees. So that way this right here runs perfectly level with the crank. So that way when we rotate the motor, it's not gonna get all crazy. So I think we are pretty good for that. And also, since I'm cutting some stuff off, losing a little bit of thickness of material by grinding, I'm going to add this gusset in here. I just cut this out of, what is this, quarter, eighth? 3/16, something like that. Just some metal that I had laying around. Although it is not going to be able to be unbolted like it would have been from Harbor Freight, but I don't care. I want it to be strong. I don't ever tear them down anyways. I just get them, I use them, you know, and all they need to do is work. So I'm gonna get the gusset welded on first, so that way we have a nice 90 for that to line up to. I'll get that tacked on, then I'll get this guy tacked on, then I will weld out the rest of this thing. So let's make some quick work out of this thing so that way we can eventually get the motor back on the stand and then start to make some good progress on the motor. Alright, so now that we have a stand that I am a lot more confident in, we also added a gusset. I can't pull the stand apart, but I don't pull these stands apart anyway, so I wanted to do what was going to work best for me. Now I'm confident that we can mess with it and work around with it. So as I've gotten a little bit into this engine, I'm finding some things that I like, some things that I don't like, but ultimately I do like it. It looks super dirty, super black. I'm cool with that. That's just with age. I don't see hardly any sludge, so that's a good sign. See, when it comes to building stuff, you got to take a look at the stuff that you're working on before you go ahead and order parts. I didn't order anything for it because I didn't even know if it's worth building at all. But now that I'm looking into it this morning here, I just went ahead and I placed a large order for a full rebuild, re-gasket set for this thing. I was debating on going high compression and doing all that crazy stuff, but I really don't know if I'm gonna do that. Ultimately, we just want to get this thing going. I want it to be healthy. I might throw a cam in it, depending on what I see. So the reason why I'm pulling the plugs out is because I want to turn the motor. I want to see if it'll spin freely. If for any reason it does not spin freely, then we know we have other problems. And I want to shoot a little bit of oil down there first. I know some people don't like PB Blaster down in the cylinders, but I don't care what you like. I'm doing this how I want to do it. So we're getting some of that in there. This motor hasn't been on in who knows how long. So I just want to make sure everything's lubed up and can spin freely. I'm not going to give it a whole bunch of time to soak in because hopefully it's good anyways. I just didn't want to spin this thing completely dry. So let's see. So here, if I wouldn't have made the modification to the stand, I wouldn't have felt comfortable rotating this thing. I pulled the spark plugs out so we're not fighting compression. Seems to be pretty good. I like it. So I'm pretty cool with that. The next thing is, let's pull off these heads. Let's lay everything out. I want to make sure there's not any type of excessive blow by getting by the pistons. If there's not, we won't have to do rings. If we're down there doing rings, maybe we'll get high comp pistons. We're not going to do that. Let's just go ahead and keep moving. Get these heads ripped off. Check out the pistons, and that'll tell us what else we need to do. Bro, so I posted this on my IG story after I welded it, kind of showing what's going on with it, and somebody brought it to my attention that it was all built together incorrectly. This piece was in front of that. This whole entire thing was facing the wrong way, so this should have been 180 out. That would have been going the other direction, so it was leaning down like this. If it would have been 180 out, it would have been leaning up. Then by the time the motor goes on it, it's probably nice and level. So that's my bad that I didn't realize that when I got it, it was assembled incorrectly. I just got this on Marketplace locally, brand new, just freshly assembled. Dude used it once and then sold it to me. So it is what it is. I spent a little bit of time welding and doing a little bit of that stuff when I could have just unbolted it, but it is what it is at this point. I'm not gonna cut it off and rework it, and it's working, it's good, it's fine. So what I'm thinking is, with this motor, it seems pretty good. I still gotta rip off the oil pan. I wanna look at the crank, figure out that stuff, figure out if I'm gonna throw a cam in this thing, kinda just see. I mean, the cylinder walls look really good. I'm not super concerned with them. There's no rust or anything. So everything ultimately looks healthy. So I need to make a decision on how far and how crazy I want to go with this thing for it to just run around in the Mustang. I was doing like a lot of math and adding up stuff. GT40 heads, a bigger cam, fully built, this and that, to try to make 450, 500 horsepower, where in reality, the amount of money that would cost, you could just throw a junkyard LS in it and make the same amount of power. So if I was really worried about power and whatnot, I don't know if it makes sense to throw a whole lot of money at an old heavy boat anchor 302. We just want this car to work. We want it to make the right noises. If I really love it, we can upgrade it. If not, it'll just be fine how it is. So really quickly, I wanted to remind you, hit the link down below to check out the El Camino giveaway. Get in there while you still can. Once that car is officially done, we have a dyno date set. We have the seats back. I also have one other major thing that I'm going to be adding to that vehicle before it goes, so be looking out for that. So get in there while you can. As far as this stuff, we have a bunch of parts on the way. I need to get organized, put some of this stuff off to the side to work on some other stuff. Then we'll come back to this. I kind of want to jump around, because as I'm waiting for parts, I need to work on some other stuff, and we are not shy of any projects around here. We have the Cadillac, we have the El Camino that we need to wrap up, we have the wide-body Mustang, now we got this Lincoln Town Car that I need to finish stripping and get rid of. If you're interested and or need any parts off of that Town Car, please do not hesitate to contact me, because everything and anything on that vehicle that I'm not going to be using is going to be available for dirt cheap. So if you could, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think of everything. Would you have went the budget route just to get something going, or would you have thrown a whole bunch of money at it? If you have a whole bunch of money to throw at it, send it my way and I'll throw it at it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like this video, comment, subscribe, do all the stuff. You know what it is, YouTube. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.